On a bright summer morning in 2018, two expert climbers, Tyler Reese and Daniel Hall, set out to conquer El Capitan, the legendary 3,000-foot granite wall in Yosemite. They were confident, prepared. They told their families, "We'll be home by nightfall." But they never made it home. No one saw them fall. No one heard a scream. Rangers searched for days, scanning every ledge, every crevice. But there was nothing. No ropes, no gear, no bodies. It was like the mountain had swallowed them whole. For 3 years, the case went cold. No clues, no leads, just silence. Then everything changed. In 2021, a group of hikers were walking through a forgotten gully near the base of El Capitan when one of them noticed something strange. It was half buried under a fallen tree, and it didn't belong there. What they found wasn't just disturbing. It shattered everything. Investigators thought they knew, and it led to a terrifying discovery. There was something hiding in Yosemite. Something dark. Something watching. And it had been waiting for years. It was June 14th, 2018. Tyler Reese and Daniel Hall stood at the base of El Capitan, one of the most dangerous and famous rock walls in the world. They were smiling, laughing, stretching out their arms. They had done climbs like this before, dozens of them. But this one felt special. "One day up and back," Daniel said, tightening his harness. "We'll be back tonight." Tyler gave a thumbs up. They were both in their early 30s. Strong, smart, and experienced. They weren't doing anything wild, just a known route called the Freerider. Tough, yes, but not impossible. They had trained for this. Before they started, they handed a nearby hiker their phone. "Can you take a photo of us?" Tyler asked. The hiker snapped a picture. Tyler and Daniel, standing tall, roped together, helmets on, faces excited. That would be the last photo ever taken of them. They checked their gear one last time. Carabiners, ropes, cams. All good. Tyler smiled and said, "See you at the top." Then they turned and began their slow, steady climb up to 3,000-foot granite. Wall. Nobody at the time thought anything strange was going to happen. Not the hiker, not the rangers, not even their families. But by nightfall, everything would change. At the bottom of El Capitan, there's a wooden box. Inside is a weatherproof notebook. Every climber who starts the wall signs in date, name, route, estimated time to return. That morning, Tyler and Daniel had signed their names in clean, clear handwriting. Date, June 14th. Route, Freerider, expected return. Same day. It was a routine part of any climb. But it was important. If something went wrong, it helped rangers know where to look. After signing in, they clipped the pen back into place and closed the logbook. Nothing unusual. But later that night, a ranger checked the logbook again. The names were still there, but something was missing. There was no checkout. No note saying "we're down" or "finished." No second signature. Just silence. The logbook, once just a normal record, became a piece of evidence. It showed they started the climb, but never finished it. And it was the first sign that something wasn't right. By 9 p.m., Tyler's sister got worried. He always texted after a climb. Always. But that night, nothing came through. She called his phone. No answer. It went straight to voicemail. Daniel's girlfriend tried his phone too. Same thing. Voicemail. No texts. "No, we're down safe." Message. Just silence. At first, they told themselves it was fine. Maybe their phones died. Maybe they camped on the wall. Climbers sometimes did that if the weather changed. But still, Tyler and Daniel had said they'd be back the same day. By midnight, both families were panicking. They called the ranger station. A ranger confirmed their names were in the logbook, but there was no checkout. That was enough. At 2 o'clock. A ranger was sent to the base of the wall with binoculars. He scanned the dark granite face, looking for headlamps or movement, but nothing. Just black rock, moonlight, and trees swaying in the wind. The two men had vanished without a sound. By sunrise, search and rescue teams were already setting up near El Capitan. Rangers marked Tyler and Daniel's last known point, the base of the freerider route. From there, the wall stretched straight up cold, vertical granite. It was a climb they should have finished in one day. Now, no one knew where they were. The first team hit the air. A chopper circled the wall, scanning every inch with high-powered cameras. A second helicopter followed close behind, carrying spotters with binoculars. Drones were launched to cover tight areas too dangerous for people. Climbers joined the effort. Rangers brought in volunteers from nearby camps, some who had climbed with Tyler and Daniel before. They rappelled down from the top, shouting names. Checking ledges. Nothing. Not a rope, not a helmet, not a single water bottle. On the ground, officers interviewed hikers and campers who'd been in the area that day. Nobody had seen Tyler or Daniel after the morning. No shouts, no falls, no sounds of gear dropping. One hiker remembered hearing laughter that morning near the trailhead. That was at dawn as night fell on day one of the search. A sick feeling grew. In everyone's stomach, the mountain wasn't talking, and neither were the trees. Day 2 brought no progress. Day 3, the same. By day 4, search leaders admitted it. This wasn't normal. Climbers fall. Gear fails. Accidents happen. But there's always something left behind. A rope hanging off the wall, blood, a torn glove, a scream someone heard. But here, nothing. It was like Tyler and Daniel had simply disappeared. Right in the middle of their climb, rescue workers ran. Every scenario. Maybe they fell into a crevice. But El Capitan doesn't have crevices deep enough to hide two people. Maybe they wandered off the route. But why would both do that at the same time? Investigators checked nearby cliffs, forest trails, even the Merced River below. Still nothing. Not even a broken twig that pointed the way. Then came the hardest part, telling the families that the search might slow down. The Hall and Reese families begged them not to stop. Keep looking, they said. Don't give up. But behind closed doors, Rangers whispered the thing no one wanted to say out loud. It's like the wall swallowed them. And that phrase would haunt this case for the next 3 years. By day 5, the search had become an obsession. Teams of rangers, rescue workers, and volunteers spread out in every direction. They searched not just the wall, but the forest below, nearby cliffs, riverbanks, and even deep cracks between rocks. Some climbed El Capitan again, looking for missed clues. Others hiked into thick woods with machetes, cutting through underbrush that hadn't been touched in years. They found animal bones, broken branches, even an old boot, but nothing linked to Tyler or Daniel. Helicopters flew long hours overhead. Thermal drones scanned for heat. Police dogs were brought in. Nothing worked. A local climber who knew Tyler personally said, "They didn't just fall. They didn't just walk away. Something else happened." Still, no one knew what. The Rangers worked 12-hour shifts, eating granola bars and sleeping in tents, hoping the next day would bring answers. But every new search ended the same way, empty, handed. By now, even the most experienced rescuers admitted it out loud. The mountain wasn't giving them back. No gear, no blood, no sign of distress. It was like Tyler and Daniel had been erased from the landscape, and each passing hour made one thing terrifyingly clear. They weren't coming back. While search teams worked the land, investigators worked the people. They spoke to every camper and climber who had been near El Capitan that day. Some were in tents. Others had been on trails nearby. A few had climbed other routes that morning. Dozens of people were interviewed. Some were even brought in twice. No one had seen anything after 9 a.m. and A family on vacation remembered hearing voices early in the morning near the base of the wall, but they couldn't say who it was. A solo hiker had passed the freerider trail around Tenema but saw nothing unusual. Investigators asked again and again, "Did you hear a scream? See anyone fall? Notice loose gear?" The answer was always no. One ranger said it was like trying to solve a puzzle with no pieces. The only thing they knew for sure was when Tyler and Daniel started their climb. After that, it was just blank space. The longer it stayed blank, the stranger it felt. By week 2, the case started to shift. Quietly, behind closed doors, some investigators began to ask a strange question. What if they didn't fall? What if they disappeared on purpose? It sounded crazy at first, but with no injuries, no gear left behind, and no evidence of a fall, the idea started to grow. Maybe they faked their deaths. Maybe they were running from something, death, danger, or someone trying to hurt them. Agents checked credit cards, bank accounts, and phones. All activity stopped the day of the climb. They looked into past legal issues, family problems, even possible links to criminal cases. Nothing. Clean records. No history of trouble. Still, some officers believed it. It wouldn't be the first time someone used a national park to disappear. One said, even the idea of witness protection was floated. But the families pushed back hard. Tyler and Daniel weren't running from anything, one relative said. They loved climbing. They loved life. With no solid evidence of a staged escape and no sign of foul play, investigators were stuck in the middle. Either something terrible had happened, or something unexplainable. Theories were swirling, but facts were frozen. After nearly 4 weeks of nonstop effort, the official search was called off. The Rangers didn't make the decision lightly. They held a meeting with the families first. The tone was grim. They explained how many miles had been searched, how many hours had been logged, how many cliffs had been checked twice, and how it all led nowhere. One ranger quietly said, "We don't know where else to look." The next day, tents came down. Helicopters were flown back to base. Search dogs were taken off the mountain. It was over. But for the families of Tyler and Daniel, it didn't feel like the end of a search. It felt like a funeral with no bodies. Daniel's mother said she kept looking at the trees, expecting to see him walk out. Tyler's sister stayed near the base of El Capitan, staring up at the route. They were supposed to come back down, she whispered. The nights turned colder, and the mountains stayed silent. Everyone who had tried to find the boys left the park with the same feeling something here wasn't right. They hadn't fallen. They hadn't run. So where were they? When the Rangers stepped back, the internet stepped in. People on Reddit, YouTube, and Facebook started digging. Most had never met Tyler or Daniel, but they were hooked by the mystery. A user posted side by side photos of their gear from an old Instagram post and a public park sighting 3 months earlier. Another mapped out possible off-grid escape routes. Some claimed to hear voices in wind recordings taken from El Capitan summit. Theories exploded. Overnight, some said the climbers had found a hidden cave system and gotten trapped. Others believed in darker ideas, a stalker, or maybe a serial killer who used the wall as bait. One viral thread even claimed that El Capitan itself was cursed, that several climbers had disappeared over the years, always under strange conditions. No proof, but enough coincidences to get people talking. There were also skeptics. People don't vanish mid-climb. One user wrote, "There's always something. Blood, rope, a shoe. This is staged." Podcasts picked up the case. YouTubers made deep dives. Comment sections filled with speculation, arguments, and desperate hope. But nothing real ever surfaced. Not a single new clue. No gear listed for sale online. No movement on their bank accounts. Not even a false sighting. Just Nothing. The internet asked the same question the Rangers had asked. Where did they go? And just like before, no one had an answer. It was a quiet Thursday afternoon, almost 3 years after Tyler and Daniel vanished. 3 friends, Ben, Alicia, and Marcus, were hiking off trail near the base of El Capitan. They weren't looking for trouble, just exploring. The woods were dense, and they followed a small game path into a narrow gully. No one usually hiked through. It was strangely silent down there. No birds, no wind. Then Marcus slipped. His foot caught on something buried in the ground. He fell forward and scraped his knee. As he stood up, brushing dirt off his hands, he noticed something strange sticking out of the soil. It was a piece of metal. Bent, dirty, dull gray. "Hey, what is that?" he said. They all leaned in. Alicia grabbed a stick and gently poked around. More of the metal shape became visible. It looked almost like a buckle or a hook. Maybe even part of a harness? Ben pulled out his phone to take a picture. That's when Alicia found the second item. A dark strap, maybe nylon, wrapped around a twisted tree root. It looked old, but strong. The friends exchanged nervous looks. "This isn't trash," Ben whispered. "This is climbing gear." They had no idea what they had just stepped into, but they called the park rangers immediately. While waiting for the rangers, the hikers stayed near the spot. They didn't touch anything else, but they looked closely. Half buried beneath the roots of a crooked pine tree was a climbing harness. The straps were faded and stiff. Dirt had filled the fabric. Parts of it had clearly been chewed by animals or worn down by time. Still, it was there, and hanging from one of the loops was a metal carabiner doll, but mostly intact. Alicia leaned closer. There were letters scratched into the side of the metal. Not printed, scratched, maybe by hand. She read them out loud. "T-Merb." Ben blinked. "Tyler Reynolds," he said softly. It hit all 3 of them at once. They backed up. The mood changed from curiosity to shock. No one said it out loud, but they were all thinking the same thing. What if this is where he died? The air felt colder now, heavier. They kept their distance until help arrived, and deep down, they already knew this wasn't just lost gear. This was the start of something much bigger. 2 park rangers arrived within the hour. Then more followed. The area was sealed off fast. Tape went up. Photos were taken. Every step was documented. One ranger crouched down and gently moved soil away from the harness. Another started pulling away leaves and sticks. A third flagged the area with orange markers. Then they found something else. A crushed climbing helmet, red, cracked, and covered in moss. Moments later, they pulled out a torn glove. Then a coiled rope, stiff with dirt. Bits of broken metal. A faded jacket. Each new item made it worse. No bones yet. No body. But all of it looked like it had been there for years, hidden just below the surface. The most chilling part? The gear wasn't scattered. It was tangled together, like it had all been dumped or dropped in the same moment. One ranger said it quietly. This wasn't a false sight. This is where they were left. The hikers were asked to leave. A forensic team was called. News didn't break right away. Officials kept it quiet until they knew what they were looking at. But the rangers already had a gut feeling. They had just found the first real clue in a mystery that had gone cold for years. As the forensic team worked through the site, they noticed something odd near a small rock formation, just 10 feet from the tangled gear. It looked like nothing at first, just a neat pile of medium-sized stones stacked on one another. But it was too orderly, too intentional, like someone had placed them carefully, not by accident. One of the investigators slowly began removing them, stone by stone. At the bottom, the dirt underneath was looser, softer, like it had been disturbed. They kept digging. That's when they found the first bone. It was long, curved, clearly human, a few inches deeper, Another bone appeared, then another, then a skull, then something else, a second skull, 2 sets of human remains. Placed side by side, heads tilted slightly toward each other, no signs of trauma. No blood, just clean, dry bone. The bodies hadn't been buried deep, just hidden under a careful, almost respectful pile of stones. The team went quiet. This wasn't the chaotic scene of a fall. There were no scattered remains, no broken limbs lying in strange places. Whoever put the rocks there knew exactly what they were doing. Someone had placed these bodies here on purpose, and no one could explain why. The bones were sent off to a forensic lab that same week. While DNA testing takes time, dental records don't lie. Just 10 days later, the results came back. It was them, Tyler Reynolds and Daniel Griggs. Gone for nearly 3 years. Found less than a mile from their last known location, yet completely off the standard climbing route. The news hit their families like a wave. There were no screams, just silence. Tyler's mother reportedly dropped the phone when she heard. Daniel's dad just stood still for almost 2 minutes before saying, "Where did they go for 3 years?" But something wasn't adding up. First, the bones. They were far too clean. Almost no damage, no animal marks, no evidence of weather exposure, even after all this time. Second, the gear. Experts said some of the items looked newer than expected. Not brand new, but not 3 years old either. Like someone had moved or stored them. And then there was the biggest problem. That place, the hidden gully where they were found, was nowhere near any documented climbing route. Not even a mistake would have taken them that far off course. Both Tyler and Daniel were elite climbers. They knew that mountain. They had no reason to be in that gully. And no way to get there mid-climb without someone else. The Rangers were shaken. This wasn't just a tragic accident anymore. This was something else entirely. And nobody, not the experts, not the families, not even the investigators, was ready for what that meant. The forensic team ran a full analysis on both sets of bones. Everyone expected fall-related injuries, broken legs, fractured spines, crushed skulls. But that's not what they found. Instead, the injuries looked strange. Not like the clean breaks you'd see from a drop. There were sharp fractures, as if something hit them hard from close range. The ribs were cracked inward. One skull had a deep dent on the side, like it had been struck with a heavy object. Then came the worst part. Inside the bones, doctors found signs of blunt force trauma, internal bruising, compression damage, but not the kind that happens from hitting rocks while falling. More like they were hit with something before they died, and both bodies had it. Even more confusing, there were no defensive wounds, no broken hands, no finger fractures. That usually means the victims didn't fight back. They were either asleep or didn't see it coming. The evidence didn't match a climbing accident at all. One investigator said it clearly. This wasn't a fall. This was something else. Something violent. Something done on purpose. It was no longer just a disappearance. It was now officially a suspicious death, and investigators had no idea who did it. Or why. Next, they tested the climbing rope found near the bodies. It should have shown signs of wear, friction burns, frayed edges, or tension breaks from a fall. That's normal in most accidents. But again, this rope told a different story. One section had a clean, straight edge, like it had been cut with a sharp blade. No burn marks, no stretching, just a smooth slice through thick climbing cord. Experts tried to recreate it using sharp rocks or tools found nearby. Nothing worked. The only way to get that clean of a cut was with a knife or blade. And it wasn't just the rope. The gear straps were also damaged, but not torn. They'd been deliberately sliced in multiple spots. Shoulder harnesses, chest clips, Safety cords cut in ways that would only make sense. If someone wanted to disable them before a climb, that meant one of two things. Either Tyler and Daniel had been climbing with damaged gear which made no sense, or someone else had done it after they disappeared. A ranger leaned back in his chair and said, "Someone knew what they were doing? They didn't just want them to fall. They wanted it to look like a mistake." But now, that lie was falling apart. Investigators went back to the original route, Freerider on El Capitan. They scanned every ledge, every anchor, every known stopping point where Tyler and Daniel might have camped or climbed. Dozens of experts checked for any signs of a fall-broken gear. Blood stains, scuff marks on the wall. They found nothing. No blood. No broken rocks. Not even scratch marks that would suggest panic or slipping. The area looked untouched, like they'd never been there at all. That made no sense. If the attack had happened on the wall, there would have been a mess. Even animals leave trails. But here, nothing. Not a trace of violence. No gear thrown. No clothing pieces. No drag marks. It felt too clean. Too empty. And that raised a dark, new question. If this wasn't where they were attacked, where were they taken? Because it was starting to look like the real crime didn't happen on the cliff. It happened somewhere else. Somewhere they were brought. Somewhere they were silenced. And whoever did it, they'd left behind nothing. Just two bones under a pile of rocks. And a mystery that was growing darker by the hour. The more investigators studied the recovery site, the more they realized something chilling. Tyler and Daniel didn't die there. The slope where their remains were found was remote, tucked behind thick brush, a full mile from any popular route. There was no direct line of descent. No signs they'd climbed or fallen into that spot. Even more telling, the soil. It was soft, undisturbed, no drag marks, no broken branches. Whoever placed the bodies there had come in quietly, maybe even from above. It wasn't a place people stumbled into. You had to know where it was. One expert put it simply, they were moved. No doubt in my mind. Search teams had combed this area during the first year. Multiple passes, helicopters, dogs, and yet they found nothing. The bodies weren't there back then, which meant someone brought them later. That idea hit hard, because it meant someone kept the bodies for a while. Held on to them. Then returned months or even years later to bury them like a secret. The question now wasn't just who had done it, but why wait so long, and what had happened in the time between. As the pieces came together, a disturbing idea started to surface. What if this wasn't random? What if it wasn't just a robbery or an accident? What if someone had been watching? Someone who knew when Tyler and Daniel would climb. Someone who waited, followed, watched from the trees. Maybe even pretended to be another hiker. The FBI was now unofficially involved. They didn't make public statements, but behind closed doors, they offered resources and one key theory. They'd seen something like this before. Isolated locations, no witnesses, carefully concealed remains, gear altered after death, bodies moved long after disappearance. One agent called it classic behavior of a wilderness predator. Not an animal, a person, someone who hunted humans. The mountain, the remoteness, the gear, it all provided perfect cover. Whoever this was knew the terrain. They were patient, methodical, and terrifyingly quiet. Investigators began reviewing every reported incident in Yosemite from the past 5 years. Missing persons, strange encounters, unreported crimes. A few things stood out. One solo climber had reported seeing a man watching her from the trees just 2 weeks before Tyler and Daniel vanished. Another hiker had returned to their tent to find their gear slashed and rearranged with nothing stolen. Back then, it seemed creepy, but random. Now, it looked like a pattern, a chilling possibility. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't random. This might have been a hunt. And Tyler and Daniel? They weren't the first ones on that list. Just the first ones found. Her name was Leah Morgan. She used to work part-time on trail maintenance in Yosemite. One day in 2018, she was clearing brush near a popular climbing route not far from El Capitan. It was early morning, quiet, still. She stopped to drink water, and that's when she saw him, a man, wearing full camouflage. He was crouched behind a cluster of trees, motionless, holding binoculars. He wasn't looking at her. He was staring toward the wall where a group of climbers were beginning their ascent. At first, Leah thought maybe he was a photographer or a ranger. But something felt off. He wasn't taking pictures. He wasn't writing notes. He was just watching for a long time. Too long. Leah slowly moved away, trying not to be seen. She didn't tell the climbers. She didn't call it in, but 5 years later, after hearing about the discovery of Tyler and Daniel's remains, she couldn't stop thinking about it. Could that man have been watching them? She called the park rangers, gave a full report, even drew a rough sketch. Her memory wasn't perfect, but she remembered one thing very clearly. His face was painted, like he wanted to disappear. Back in 2018, Leah had told someone. After that strange encounter, she mentioned it to her shift supervisor, a man named Todd. She wasn't even trying to report anything official. Just said, "Hey, I saw this weird guy watching climbers through binoculars today." Todd shrugged. Said it was probably just a bird watcher or someone doing wildlife photography. He didn't ask for details, didn't write it down, didn't tell anyone. And Leah? She let it go. Until now, once she saw the news about the bones, the hidden site, and the FBI getting involved, she felt sick. She remembered the way the man crouched, the way he blended into the forest, the way he never moved. Even when she passed nearby. She called the new ranger in charge. This time, they listened. They pulled old shift logs, verified Leah's schedule. They even went back to her original work zone. And when she showed them exactly where she saw the man, it was less than 800 yards from where Tyler and Daniel's remains were eventually found. She didn't know it then, but she may have seen the killer, and no one followed up. Now, with Leah's statement in hand, the FBI took full control. They began digging into every climbing incident in the region going back 10 years. They weren't looking for deaths or robberies. They were searching for strange behavior. Little things. Things most people had ignored. Within weeks, a pattern formed. Multiple climbers had filed odd complaints. Some reported hearing rustling sounds at night too rhythmic to be animals. Others said their gear had been rearranged while they slept. Nothing stolen, just moved. In one case, a climber woke up to find his shoes missing. They were later discovered hanging 20 feet up in a nearby tree. It had seemed like a prank, but now it didn't feel funny anymore. One report mentioned a man wearing face paint near a trailhead. Another claimed to see someone standing still on a ridge for over an hour, just watching. Most of these incidents happened in the same area, within the same stretch of woods, just a few miles from where Tyler and Daniel had vanished. It was no longer a theory. Someone had been out there. Someone who stalked the forest, watched the climbers, moved through trees like a ghost. And maybe, just maybe, he was still there. As the FBI's theory spread quietly through the ranger network, something strange started happening. Climbers began talking, not in interviews, not in official reports. But in group chats, forums, old Reddit threads, around campfires at the base of El Capitan. They started sharing stories they'd once brushed off, things they had chalked up to paranoia or exhaustion. But now they weren't so sure. A woman remembered hearing whistling at 2 a.m. coming from deep in the woods. The tune never repeated, just 3 soft notes. Then silence. Another climber recalled setting up camp alone and waking up to find all the rocks around. His tent had been stacked into a small pyramid sometime during the night. Someone else described seeing a man on the ridge, face obscured by shadows, standing motionless with his hands in his coat. They waved. The man didn't wave back. He just stood there, staring. That was 2 weeks before Tyler and Daniel disappeared. For years, these stories lived in the background, passed around like campfire folklore. Yosemite was full of weird tales. But now they carried a new weight, a new fear, because they all happened near the same roots, the same zone, and almost all of them ended with the same line. I just figured it was in my head. But what if it wasn't? The more investigators dug, the more one theory started to make terrifying sense. They weren't looking for a killer who came and went. They were looking for someone who never left, someone who had been living inside Yosemite. For years. No trail of receipts, no vehicles, no phone pings, no online presence. A ghost? The working theory? A rogue survivalist, possibly ex-military. Someone who knew the backcountry better than most rangers. Someone with the skills and motivation to live off-grid and kill without leaving evidence. He didn't need shelter. He built his own. He didn't need power. He used the sun and the stars. He didn't want to be seen. So he made sure he wasn't. This man, whoever he was, knew how to disappear in plain sight. And the deeper the FBI went, the more evidence they found that supported the idea. Freshwater caches hidden beneath moss. Animal traps not registered with park services. Small campsites that had been covered with leaves and branches to blend into the forest floor. Someone had lived out here, comfortably, quietly, for a long time. But why climbers? That was the darkest part of the theory. Maybe he saw them as invaders, outsiders disturbing his space. Or maybe it wasn't about the climbing at all. Maybe it was about control, picking the perfect moment, watching from above. Waiting for the exact time to strike. Whatever the reason, there was something horrifyingly clear. This man didn't just kill. He hunted. And the mountains had hidden him for years. The FBI had a plan. They knew whoever left Tyler and Daniel's bodies in the gully had to come back. Maybe to check, maybe to clean up, or maybe just to watch. So the team set a trap. They placed motion-triggered cameras all around the area, up in trees, hidden in brush, and near game trails. These were silent, invisible. If anyone stepped into range, the camera would snap a photo or start recording instantly. Then they waited. Day 1, nothing. Day 2, wind, deer, a squirrel. Day 3, a bear sniffed the lens. Then silence again. By day 5, the agents were getting restless. Maybe the killer knew. Maybe he had moved on. Or maybe he was just smarter than them. But then, on the 6th night, around 3:12 a.m., one of the cameras triggered. Movement in the dark. The footage was short, only 9 seconds. But it was enough. Shadow passed between 2 trees. Tall, thin, quick. Like he knew where the camera was. Like he was trying not to be seen. The agents froze when they watched it. It wasn't an animal. It wasn't a hiker. It was a man. And now they had a direction. The team enhanced the video. It was grainy, filmed in low light, but clear enough to spot details. The man was older, maybe in his late 50s, thin body, big beard, long hair tucked into a camo hat. Clothes looked homemade or stitched together. His jacket was patched with duct tape, but that wasn't the strangest part. He was dragging something, a long, heavy-looking sack, dark-colored. It dragged across the leaves, leaving a trail. He pulled it behind him with both hands, slow and careful. Was it supplies? Trash? Or something worse? They zoomed in. The sack seemed too heavy for simple gear, too stiff to be just fabric. And the way he looked around, constantly checking the trees, turning his head every few steps. He wasn't just out for a walk. He was hiding something, and he knew this area well. The way he moved between trees, never stepping on loud branches, avoiding the camera angle near the gully. He'd done this before. Then he stopped, looked up, not directly at the camera, but close. He turned fast and vanished into the dark, gone in seconds. But now the FBI had something real, a face, a body, a direction, and a trail to follow. By sunrise, the FBI was already in the woods. They had teams spread out, walking in a grid. Some followed the drag marks. Others used heat-sensing drones. Rangers joined in too. They knew the area better than anyone. Less than half a mile from the gully, they found it, a hidden camp, tucked between thick trees and rocks, almost invisible. Unless you were standing right on top of it. There was a blue tarp tied low between trees. Under it, an old sleeping bag, torn and dirty. Nearby, a pile of tools, a hunting knife, a broken axe, and some rusty snares. Food wrappers were everywhere. Empty cans of beans, protein bar wrappers, bottles filled with yellow liquid. He hadn't left a resupply in a while, but that wasn't the worst part. Near the fire pit, one agent spotted something red in the leaves. It was a glove, soaked in old blood. They picked it up carefully, bagged it, and marked the area. Then they kept searching. Behind the tarp, covered with sticks, was a small dugout pit. Inside, bones of animals. Some still had fur. Some looked too big, too human. The team stopped everything, called for backup, locked down the area. Whoever lived here wasn't just camping. He had been living like this for years, hiding, hunting, and maybe killing. The trap had worked. They had found his den. Now they just had to catch the man who built it. Agents slowly unzipped the tent. Inside was something no one expected. It looked like a storage unit, not for gear but for trophies. Laid out on a torn blanket were climbing ropes neatly coiled, some still stained with dirt or blood. Helmets stacked in a row. Climbing harnesses. CARABINERS. Then -ID cards. One said Tyler Banks. Another had Daniel's picture. Their driver's licenses. Their permits. This was proof. But it got worse. There were other IDs too. Some were old. One had expired over 10 years ago. A few names weren't even in the Yosemite database. No missing persons reports. No recent alerts. Just faces. People no one was even looking for. The team marked each item, photographed everything. Some gear was unique, customized, marked with names or stickers. One backpack had Shannon Ridge marks, written in faded Sharpie. That name wasn't in any climbing registry. How many victims were there? No one knew yet. But clearly Tyler and Daniel weren't the first, and maybe not the last. The tent wasn't just a shelter. It was a collection, a record of people who had come into these woods and never left, and the man who made it was still out there. The camp looked fresh, recently used. The fire pit had warm ash. A sock was still drying on a tree branch. But the man? Gone. Not a single footprint. No fresh drag marks. No broken twigs. No trail leading out. It was like he vanished into the forest. The agents widened the search area. Drones flew overhead. Dogs were brought in. Rangers scouted cliffs, rivers, and caves. Nothing. Whatever trail he left, if any, was cold now. But one thing was clear. This man knew the land better than anyone. He knew how to hide, how to survive, and how to move without being seen. And he had been doing it for years. Living in Yosemite, right under everyone's noses, hiding in trees while hikers passed by, watching rangers from cliffs. slipping in and out of camps and picking his targets. Tyler and Daniel's deaths weren't random. Their gear was taken. Their bodies were moved. Their memories stored in that tent. This wasn't a mistake. It was a pattern. Silent predator had been hunting in one of the busiest national parks in America. Now he was gone again. No one knew where he went or when he'd return, but they knew one thing for sure: this wasn't over. Not yet. 2 months had passed. The FBI, park rangers, and local sheriffs were still searching. Cameras were everywhere. Drones flew daily. But there were no signs of the man who had vanished into the forest. Then, on a quiet Wednesday morning, something changed. A tracker spotted it, just a tiny bend in the grass. Fresh. Still wet from dew. Not made by an animal. About 50 feet away. Behind a fallen tree, a twig had snapped clean cracked in two recently. They radioed it in. Within hours, a team of 6 moved quietly into the backcountry. They didn't talk. They didn't crunch leaves. Every step was slow. Careful. Then, one ranger stopped. He pointed through the trees. There, about 80 yards away, was a thin man crouched by a stream. His back was to them. He was rinsing something. In the water. A pot? His hands? They surrounded him slowly. No sudden movements. The lead agent stepped forward and calmly said, "Sir, don't move." The man didn't flinch. He just turned his head slightly and nodded. No running. No fight. No words. He stood up, raised his hands, and looked directly at the agent. He was old, gray beard, dirt-stained clothes, thin but steady. His eyes were sharp. He knew this moment would come. He didn't resist. They arrested him on the spot. And as they walked him out of the forest, one agent whispered, "We found the ghost." At the station, they ran his prints. Everyone waited, tense, curious. Then the system chimed. Match found. His name was Richard Lane, a former Yosemite ranger. Missing since 2003. He wasn't just a drifter in the woods. He had worn the badge. He had led tours, rescued hikers, taught survival classes. Then he vanished. Back then, they thought he had died during a storm. His truck was found near a river. No body, just some gear washed up downstream. They searched for weeks, but eventually they gave up. Called it a tragic accident. Turns out, it was then single quotes the Richard Lane had faked his death, left everything behind, went deep into the wilderness, and never came back. For over 20 years, he lived like a ghost in the park, watching, hiding, surviving off the land. He knew every trail, every blind spot. He avoided cameras, camps, and even planes. But he didn't stay hidden forever. When agents searched his campsite, they found old ranger maps, detailed notes, schedules, radio frequencies. He had been listening. He knew when search parties were near, when people were vulnerable, and for some reason he had turned against the very people he once protected. He didn't just vanish. He became something else. Something dangerous. And now, after 2 decades, Richard Lane was finally back in handcuffs. Inside the interrogation room, Lane sat calmly. He didn't ask for a lawyer. He didn't ask for food. He just stared at the wall for a long time. Then, when the lead agent asked what happened to Tyler and Daniel, Lane simply said, "They disrespected the mountain." The room went silent. He said he had been watching the 2 climbers for days. "Too loud," he said. "Too proud. They didn't respect the space." He said they were reckless, careless, making noise, leaving gear out, not listening. When asked about the ropes, Lane didn't hesitate. He nodded. "Yes, I cut them." The agents leaned forward. "Why?" "They didn't belong there," Lane said. "Not everyone gets to touch the sky. No regret. No emotion." He said he waited until they were high up. Then he slipped in during the night. Used an old Ranger Trail 1, no longer on maps. He climbed. Halfway up, cut both ropes with a blade he kept hidden in his boot, then vanished before sunrise. He watched them fall. He said they didn't scream after that. He dragged their bodies far away from the site. He didn't want them near his land, his home. He said the gear he took was payment, the IDs, records, and the other names? Other gear. He smiled, said nothing, but the agents knew. This wasn't his first time. Richard Lane hadn't just killed 2 climbers. He had declared war on outsiders. After hours of questioning, one agent finally asked Lane, "Did you actually see them fall?" Lane slowly turned his head and said, "Yes, I was there." He leaned forward and tapped the table lightly, like he was marking time. I was above them, on the overlook ridge. They didn't know I was there. I had cut the ropes the night before. Used my boot knife. Clean slice. The kind you don't notice until it's too late. He paused, then said it again. I watched them fall. He didn't blink. He described how Daniel fell first. The rope snapped fast, a sharp crack. Then silence. A flash of color tumbling. Against the rock. Tyler held on longer. He tried to brace, claw the wall. But the second rope gave out just minutes later. Lane said he didn't move. He just sat on the ridge, listening, watching dust rise from the gully below. That night, he returned. He said he moved fast like an old habit. Dragged both bodies from the impact zone down toward the lower gully. Didn't want scavengers finding them, he said. He placed rocks over them, the kind that blends in. Took time. When asked why he kept their IDs, Lane shrugged. Proof, he said. So I'd remember their names. It wasn't rage or madness. It was a quiet decision, made in cold silence. And now finally spoken. Out loud. The confession spread fast. Within hours, news stations were running breaking alerts. Former Ranger confesses to Capitan killings. Photos of Tyler and Daniel filled every screen. Graduation pictures, climbing shots, and family photos taken before their final trip. Climbers from all over the world reacted with shock and sadness. For them, Yosemite had always been sacred. Safe. A place of challenge, not fear. Now, that trust was broken. Articles flooded the internet. Talk shows brought in experts. Podcasts called it one of the darkest stories in outdoor history. The families released statements. Short, painful. Daniel's father said, he died doing what he loved, but he didn't deserve this. Tyler's sister posted just 5 words. My brother was the light. The climbing community demanded change, more patrols, mental health checks for isolated rangers, stricter backcountry access for long-term campers. Yosemite officials held a press conference. They called it an unthinkable tragedy. But some critics asked harder questions. How did a former ranger live hidden in the park for 20 years? And how many others had vanished in that same area? Lane's arrest didn't bring peace. It brought fear. And a haunting reminder that even the wildest places hold secrets. Weeks later, 2 climbers hiked to the gully. They brought nothing but ropes, helmets, and a single bouquet. At the base of the wall. They placed the flowers under a smooth stone. No words were spoken. That gully, once just another part of El Capitan, was now something else. A grave, a story, a warning. Since Lane's arrest, dozens of climbers have visited that same spot. Some leave gear tags. Some leave chalked handprints on nearby boulders. Others sit in silence for hours, staring up at the wall. It's become a quiet ritual, a way to say, we remember. Tyler and Daniel never got a chance to finish their climb. But their story now lives on in every climber who ties in, checks their gear, and looks up at the massive granite face, knowing what happened there. A small plaque was placed near the trailhead by the National Park Service. It reads, "In memory of Tyler Green and Daniel Voss. Taken too soon. May this mountain always." Remember, it doesn't mark where they died, it marks where the world changed. And even now, years later, people still leave flowers, still whisper their names, still ask the question no one can answer. Why?